Today I'm going to answer all of your how to bake a cake questions. We're going to go through my how to bake a cake video, and I'm going to answer the questions that I've had so many of you ask me, especially the question about there's no butter and no milk in your cake recipe. Why is that? So we're going to answer all of that today. Let's start by going through the video together. I'll zoom through so that you're not having to watch everything really for a long period of time, but we're going to go through it quickly. So as you can see, this is my video, and I uploaded it like way back in, it doesn't even say here, but it was like 2011. So it's a pretty old video, and it's amazing. It's got over 4 million views so far, and tons and tons of thousands of comments. So thank you to everybody who liked this video and who left me your comments. I read every single one. I try to answer back every single comment because you matter to me, and I just really appreciate you taking the time to watch my video. So who am I? Welcome back if you're used to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Amanda Vandergulik from cleverdoughcakes.com, where I teach fun cake decorating ideas and yummy baking recipes just to help you, inspire you to make your own cakes, especially right now during a pandemic when it's not so easy to go out and buy a cake. It's a little bit safer to stay home, or it's a lot safer to stay home and make your own cakes from home and from scratch. All right, so here we go. Oh, probably helps if I turn the sound on. Okay, here we go. Let's try this again.
Welcome! Today we're going to show you how to bake a cake. For this cake, we're going to preheat our oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is approximately 180 degrees Celsius.
All right, so exactly it's 175 degrees Celsius, but at the time I wasn't 100% sure, but it really doesn't matter. A couple of degrees either way is going to be fine. Your oven is going to determine how strong you need to set it, because some ovens cook a lot hotter and some ovens cook a lot cooler. Plus, the environment where you live can make a huge difference on your baking as well. If you're in a very humid environment, your cakes may actually need a little bit longer because of the humidity that needs to dry out of the cakes. So these temperatures are approximates, and as you bake your cake, you're going to notice whether you need to cook it a little bit longer, a little bit higher, a little bit cooler, but use these as your base measurements. Now take a look at this. So see, when I turn around here, this was the funniest thing. So this in my hair here, leave me a comment below if you know what this is. Okay, so I had no clue that I even had this in my hair. I never knew this until a couple of years after I posted this video, and I was watching it again because somebody asked me a question about something and I was just double checking, and I'm like, hey, what's in my hair? And what it is, it's actually, well, leave me a comment below and see if you can guess what it is. But how it ended up in my hair, I don't know if you can see it, there's a little magnet on the back of it. It's a really handy kitchen tool, especially if you do like to drink milk. That's my tip, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. You'll have to leave me a comment below. But it sticks on the fridge so that you have it handy. And I must have walked past the fridge, and the tail of my braid here must have caught it, because it's got like a little hook on it, and it hooked into my braid, and I never knew, because I probably found it on the floor later and just thought, oh, it had been knocked off the fridge, and just put it back on, never thinking that it actually made a debut in my video. And I've actually had a ton of people ask me, what the heck is in your hair, Amanda? So let me know in the comments below if you know what it is, and I'll write down in the comments as well, or I'll put it in the description. So you have to check the description to find out what it is. All right, let's keep going. So we're setting the oven. Now let's just zoom past here. All right, so then, okay, this is a really great question that I've been asked a lot. So in my title here, how to bake a cake, how to make a cake at home for beginners from scratch with no butter and no milk, right? So when I first posted this video, it was just called How to Bake a Cake, and that was it. And as time went on, I realized there were certain things that you guys were looking for. So I put those in there. And this particular cake recipe, it's for a sponge cake, a vanilla sponge cake recipe. And so there is actually no butter and no milk in the recipe, because milk and butter is a fat, and the fat will actually deflate the air bubbles that you put in your eggs. Because this cake uses a lot of eggs, you separate the eggs, you whip them up, and then you carefully fold in the eggs, which we'll see in a little bit. You don't want to add any fat that's going to take the air out of the eggs, because the whole purpose of a vanilla sponge cake recipe is to end up with a really light and fluffy sponge cake. It's absolutely delicious. And so yeah, it requires no milk and no butter. But of course, then I had people, lovely comments come back saying, but Amanda, you did use butter in this recipe. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're right. What I did is I lined my pan, my cake pan, with butter. I greased my cake pan with butter so that it wouldn't stick to the pan, so it could get it out of the pan. Now, if you are lactose intolerant, or if you just don't want any oils or fats in your cake, then don't use butter. You can use a non-stick cake pan, or you could line the bottom of it with parchment paper and then just slice along the edge of the cake with an offset spatula. I'll put a link to those tools in the description for you below. I found a couple of them on Amazon that I use, so I'll put a link to them in the description below for you so you know what I'm talking about. And that will loosen the cake, and then it will just fall out and you can just peel off the parchment paper. So you don't have to grease your pan with butter. I did, because I was going with easy, and that's what I had on hand. And at the time, I wasn't trying to make a cake that had no butter. It's just a cake that does not have any butter. So that was for that question. Now let's keep going. And then I've got here, let's resume through. I just want to find the ingredients for, oh, here. So this is a good tip too. So if you do use butter to line your cake, then put a little bit of flour on the butter and move it around like this. You can see how I'm tapping the cake pan to get all the excess flour out, because you don't want to have a ton of flour on your cake. And and I love being messy. I just literally let it fall on the table, which is fine because I cleaned the table afterwards and before. So that was fine. But yeah, so that will help to remove your cake after it bakes. So baking a cake is nice and easy. Okay, and then let's move on. I want to just show you the ingredients that we've got here. Okay, so here we go. So this is what you're going to need to make this cake. So you're going to need 2 bowls, so that you can whip up your egg whites in one and your egg yolks in another. And that's a question I get asked a lot as well. Why do you need to separate the eggs? The trick with a sponge cake recipe is that you want the eggs separated because you want to whip up the most air that you possibly can. And the best way to do that is to not have any of the fat. Remember when I mentioned the fat? We don't want the fat in there. And so the egg whites don't have any fat at all. And they will fluff up really well, either by hand or with a mixer or an electric mixer, stand mixer. Honestly, you could use a fork. If you haven't checked out my Q&A videos, do take a look at them. I'll put a link to them at the end of this video for you, because there are some really cool baking tips and tricks, baking hacks that'll really help you. So you want to have the small bowl is for your egg yolks and your sugar and your lemon extract and your vanilla extract, and I'll answer a couple of those questions in a moment. And then the big bowl is for your egg whites, because you want to have lots of room to fluff them up. So you're going to need 6 eggs and a cup of sugar. Now the measurements are not exact. It's more the proportions. So you're going to want to have 1 amount, so 1 cup of sugar, and it's going to be the same as your 1 amount or 1 cup of flour. And it's just all-purpose flour. That's a question I get asked a lot. Don't use baking flour, or don't use special pastry flour, because in cake flour and in baking flour, you actually already have baking soda and salt and things like that in there. And because we're actually adding those ingredients, you'd be doubling up. So just use regular baking, regular flour. Or if you're going to use a cake flour or a pastry flour, then don't put in the baking powder and the salt. Okay, so that's kind of how that works. But I prefer if you just use regular flour, you're going to get a better result in the end. All right, so then as we move along here, you can see how I show how to mix. All right, so let me just back up here. Let's get rid of this ad here. So what I did is I put the dry ingredients in this cup with the flour. So it's got the salt, the baking soda, and the flour, and I used a spoon just to mix it around gently. So the dry ingredients were ready. Then I took my, I'd already, oh wait, here I'm just showing you the ingredients. So this is the vanilla extract, and I like to use pure vanilla extract because, well, it's healthier, but it tastes so much better. It's so tasty. It's honestly, it makes your cake so yummy. And the other one here is lemon extract. And a lot of people ask me, do you have to use lemon extract or can you use lemon juice? You can absolutely use lemon juice. And actually, as a side tip, I actually use lemon juice now. I don't use it lemon extract anymore because over the years, when I didn't have it, lemon extract, which I only used because my mother taught me how to make this cake, and you tend to just do what you were told. And so when I was out of lemon extract, I decided to make it with lemon juice because I'd already put the cake together, the ingredients together, and it tasted so good. Lemon juice, that tartness that you miss in the lemon extract, there's no tartness, just the lemon flavor. You miss the tartness, and it actually complements this lemony vanilla sponge cake so well. I highly recommend use lemon juice instead of lemon extract if you can. If you don't have a choice, then just use whichever. And but yeah, it is so refreshing. It is so light and yummy. You'll love it. And the other question I get asked about these two flavorings as well is, do you have to use them? Like, what if you don't have vanilla extract, or what if you don't have lemon juice or lemon extract? Then go ahead and play with it. The whole thing about baking and baking cakes is to have fun, to try things, not worry if it doesn't turn out, really get a feel for what's going to work best, what you're going to like best. I've had people try all different kinds. I've had cinnamon ones, chocolate ones. You know, if you want to make a chocolate cake, you could just use cocoa powder in with your dry ingredients. Although with a chocolate cake, you kind of want to have a cake that does have fat in it. It works really well with the chocolate. So instead, why don't you head on over here and check out my wacky chocolate cake recipe. It's really easy and it'll work better for you than trying to make this one a chocolate cake. Okay, so yes, you can use whatever flavors you want, have fun, experiment. These two, lemon and vanilla together, they do make a tremendously delicious cake. So definitely do that if you can. All right, so let's have a look here. Here's the list, but again, you can, I put the whole recipe in this video, and I'll link to this video at the end as well for you, or in the description below so that you can see that. And so we've separated, okay, here. So here I'm separating eggs, and I've had questions about this too. There, so you can see I'm actually separating eggs right over top of the bowl. So I've had people ask me, Amanda, why do you separate the eggs like right in the bowls? Shouldn't you, and I love this, people always use the word should, shouldn't you be separating, or they'll actually just say, Amanda, you should separate it in a separate bowl first. And they're absolutely right. The reason, it's not that you have to do that, but the reason, there are two things. First of all, if you end up with a bad egg and you've separated first separately in a different bowl, you're not going to ruin the rest of the batter. But to be honest, I check my eggs before I use them. And a tip is, I don't have a glass here to show you, fill a glass with water and take your eggs and put them in the glass. And if they sink, they are safe. And if they're floating, they're no good. So don't use floaty eggs. But the other reason why you'd want to do it in a separate bowl is because separating eggs can be a little tricky, and it's really easy to break the egg yolk and it gets in the egg whites. Now the problem with that is, again, going back to the no milk, no butter part, if you have fat in the egg whites, they don't whip up as well. So that's why you want to separate it first in a bowl and then put them in their delegated bowls. So that's the answer to that one. All right, let's have a look here.
Here's our last egg.
And okay, so here I show you what it looks like. So there. So there you've got the flavorings, the sugar, the yolk. I'll just get rid of this ad here. And
Vanilla and the lemon extract.
and do I show this one? Oh yeah, and this one I just show a little bit there.
Just put this aside and wash my hands. All right, so now we have our egg white.
There, so it's just the egg whites. That's it. Now, another trick that I don't show in this video that I actually use now, and I do talk more about it in my how to bake a cake questions answered videos. So do check those out because I have some more baking hacks for you in there, is I now also add 1 tablespoon of white vinegar, or you can just do 1 teaspoon. It's fine if you're too afraid of it being vinegary. You don't taste the vinegar in the cake, but what it does is it helps add even more air volume to your egg whites, and you end up with an even fluffier sponge cake. So definitely a great tip for how to bake a cake is put some lemon or some white vinegar in with your cake, just a little bit. You're not going to taste it, but it's going to have a chemical effect of making your eggs expand even more. It's a great tip. It's also a really good tip if you're ever out of eggs. So say you had 5 eggs instead of 6, the vinegar will actually help to fill it up so that you have enough eggs. And that's another question I get asked. People say, well, why does it have to be 6 eggs? Can I not use less eggs? You can. This recipe is so versatile. It's honestly more about proportions than it is about exact measurements. So I have done this very often where I didn't have 6 eggs. I would do 4 eggs or 3 eggs, and then I would just use less sugar, less flour, and I would just do it proportionate. Or you can do more eggs. I've done many times because I needed a larger cake. I just did 8 eggs and I still used the same amount of sugar and flour, and it turned out wonderful, but the extra eggs just helped expand it. Now I've had a couple of people, and honestly out of the thousands of comments, I think I've only ever seen this like twice or maybe 3 times, where people have said that they found the cake eggy. And I was kind of like, well, there are a lot of eggs in this cake, so that's kind of a normal thing, but I understand what they meant. They meant that it smelled kind of eggy to them. And the way to overcome that is honestly just add some more vanilla or some more lemon extract if you don't like the egginess. I don't find it a bad smell at all. I love it. So, and the thousands of other comments on this channel prove that it's pretty darn yummy, even if it is a little eggy. So I hope that helped. All right, and then let's have a look here. Okay, so yeah, the first thing you want to do is whip up your egg whites. Let's see here. So I've separated them, and
so that none of your hairs will fall into.
Oh, here we go. So whip it up, and it'll take you a couple of minutes to whip it. You want to whip the egg whites so you get really stiff peaks, and I'll show you a little trick that I do right there. So
there is our egg white.
By tilting it sideways, and look at this, upside down. Ah!
That's how you know it's done.
And yes, that can be a bit scary because plop, you don't want all of your batter to drop on the table. So the trick is you turn it just slightly, see if it's moving first. You don't have to flip it all the way upside down like I did. But that will show you that the egg whites are ready. So you want to have stiff peaks, and you want it to be solid, a solid mass, not sliding around, still eggy. And then, let's see here, you want to whip up. Yeah, I do. I fluff up the egg yolk mixture with the sugar for a couple of minutes as well, because I like them both to be as fluffy as possible to get the yummiest sponge cake that we can possibly get, the lightest, fluffiest sponge cake that we possibly can. And so then this is where you mix it together. So, back it up a little bit here. Get rid of this ad. There, so have a look at how I'm mixing it.
Now we're going to add.
Did you see that? So it was a really light, gentle fold, because you don't want to cut through the air bubbles. You want to keep as many as possible. And then watch how I'm going to do the dry mixture. Sorry, losing my words here.
Our flour mixture that we made. And we're just going to simply sprinkle a little bit at a time and fold that in.
I was pretty generous there. So see how I'm scooping it from underneath?
It comes up, it will simply absorb.
And it's lifting. See that? So yeah, as you scoop down in, the batter will actually start to separate, and then the moisture is going to grab onto the flour and absorb it. And that way you're not ruining the bubbles, and you get a really nice light sponge cake.
Until we get a really nice batter.
There, and then once we have it all incorporated, put it into your cake pan. And because it's not runny, it might sit kind of like in this video here where it's kind of in one area. You can smooth it out, which is what I do. Let's see here. There, so see how I just smoothed it out like that.
You can always add an icing rose.
Ah, yes, that's a really good tip. So if you find that your cakes are not baking as well in the center, I do have a really good tip in my other cake baking questions answered video where I show you how to use an icing rose, and I'll show you what that is, in the center of your cake, and it helps spread out evenly the heat in the oven so that your cake will bake evenly all the way around. Okay, and then yeah, I'm gonna pop it in the oven, and then I think I'm testing it here soon.
We're going to take a toothpick, a wooden toothpick, and just see if it's ready.
There's this is my parents' old kitchen, and that's their clock you hear in the background.
It's looking really good. And we're going to just...
All right, so this is how you test and see if your cake is ready. It's a toothpick.
And it came out nice and clean. Try again in another area. Came out nice and clean.
Yeah, so you just want to go in the center of the cake so that you can make sure that it is fully cooked all the way through on both sides. And then if it needs to cook a little bit longer, you let it cook longer, and if not, then you just let it cool. And I've put in a hint here.
Down. And we'll turn off our oven.
That's not the tip I'm talking about. All right, but have a look. So I'm going to actually cover the cake. Here we go.
Because we sometimes have problems with flies in our houses. I don't have any problem with that right now. But this is a great way to keep your cake cooling. Just put a nice small towel on top of your cake. And it can cool at its own pace. And it won't dry out. And no bugs will get to it. So that's how I cool my cakes. And you want the cake to cool completely before we ice it, or else your icing will just simply melt on it.
That is very true. All right.
I'll show you what it looks like once it's completely cooled.
And that was another thing, is I totally forgot to upload a video showing what the inside of the cake looked like. Bad on me. And I've had a ton of people message me and say, hey, Amanda, you forgot to show us what the cake looks like. Absolutely right. However, I have since that time posted many cakes, and I usually use this recipe because it's my favorite recipe in the whole world. So I usually bake this vanilla sponge cake, and so when you look at those recipes and those cake decorating ideas, I slice into those, you'll see what this cake looks like on the inside. Yeah, my bad, totally wasn't even thinking. I wasn't really a YouTuber back then. I just wanted to share a recipe I really liked. This mocha icing, this buttercream, is delicious. It's the best compliment. Now in that recipe, which I'll link to as well in the description below for you, I use shortening, vegetable shortening. I like to use unsalted butter now. It's so much healthier for your body, and it tastes nicer. It doesn't have that waxy feel that shortening can have. So even though in that recipe I use shortening, you can substitute the shortening with unsalted butter and it'll be so much yummier, and it will work the same. So that's another tip for you. I hope you have found this really helpful. Again, don't forget to let me know in the comments below what the heck was in my braid and to check the description so I can tell you what it was. And you can check out more of my cake questions answered videos over here. Thank you so much for watching my How to Bake a Cake video, and thank you for helping me reach over 4 million views, and for all of your great questions. Keep asking them. I will always do my best to go in and answer every single comment because you mean a lot to me, and I am so grateful to you. All right, I'll see you over here.